Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. So my name is Mary Lee Miller. I have been meditating since, well, it's been almost 20 years now since I first started learning meditation. I learned originally through the Zen tradition of Buddhism. And over the course of the years, I kind of migrated a little bit over to Tibetan Buddhism. So I'm a Tibetan Buddhist practitioner. I own a company called Mala of Merit. I make their meditation beads. They're used for reciting mantras. And it's of merit because one of the primary principles in Buddhism is altruistic giving, to give things away and practice gratitude and things like that. And in that, you are said to accumulate merit or good karma. So one of the things that we do is we donate a percentage of our profits to a group called the Tibet Fund, which helps Tibetans who are living in exile. It helps preserve their culture and way of life and things. So anyway, I have essentially devoted my life to training my mind and learn how to be my best self so that I can be of most benefit to others. The one thing that brings me the most absolute joy and happiness is helping other people, even in the smallest way. It's the best. So that's why I do what I do. And so today I'm going to talk about cultivating compassion and how to learn how to accept things, right? Just accept what is. The best way to start here is, what is the fundamental nature of the mind, right? The mind is at its very core, our fundamental nature is our basic innate goodness. It's our awareness, it's love, it's compassion, it's wisdom, it's your skills and capacity. Awareness is our knowingness. It is clear, it's luminous, it's vast, never ending. It's our perceptions and how we perceive our internal and external world. Everything that appears in consciousness, we realize it's there because of our awareness. So this is also our thoughts and our emotions, physical sensations in the body. Meditation connects us with our basic innate goodness, or our fundamental nature, our awareness. When we pay attention to the present moment, we are aware of what is happening right now. Our mind is really good at distracting us. Excuse me. We spend a lot more time thinking about the past or worrying about the future. We've got a to-do list that's a mile long. We've got our all of these things in our past. Oh, if this had gone differently, then this would be this. And you're attached to something that doesn't even exist anymore. It's everything that has happened in the past is something that it's a story that you're telling yourself in your mind. It's your imagination, essentially. Yeah, these are memories and things, but really you're imagining this when you replay. And when we think about the future, when we're worried about everything that, okay, well, I have to do this, I'm so stressed out because I haven't done this yet. You're causing that because you're making up stories about the future that doesn't exist yet. And so when it's really funny, because a lot of times when people begin meditation, they say, oh no, I'm getting worse. I feel worse. Why do I feel worse? This is called the waterfall effect. When we become aware of what our mind is doing, when we pay attention to the present moment, this means paying attention to our thoughts. We can't prevent our thoughts. It's a huge misconception about meditation, is that they, we need to sit there and have no thought. You can't do that. I'll explain why in just a minute. But when we sit there and pay attention to the present moment, we can't be concerned. It's impossible for us to be concerned about the future. It's impossible for us to worry about the past. So it's really funny about the human mind. It's only really good at doing one thing at a time. The human mind, and they've proved this with neuroscience now, is actually really super bad at multitasking. So we're able to focus on doing many things at a time because our mind it can switch from one thing to the next like this, right? Faster than that. And every thought that you have only lasts for such a brief period. And then it's another thought. So when you're sitting there thinking about something all day long, it's you having a thought and then thinking about you want this thought to go away. So you think about not having the thought and then it keeps going. So when we pay attention to the present moment, that's the only thing that our mind can pay attention to. We can't pay attention to anything else. And that's why we get this peace inside of us, right? It feels peaceful. Well, sometimes it's not so peaceful because a lot of these thoughts that we automatically have in our head, a lot of this sometimes is negative self-talk. A lot of us are guilty of that. I know I certainly have been in my life. It's taken me a very long time to learn how to improve it. The best way to improve that is through being mindful, right? Every time you catch yourself saying something mean to yourself, then you bring your awareness to the present moment. You don't have to be sitting in formal meditation to do this. You do this all day long. So if let's say you forget your keys and you're like, oh, you're so stupid. Why did you do that? You say that to yourself in your head. Your mind remembers that and it makes you feel really kind of crappy. And so when you are mindful, when you learn mindfulness and bring it out into your everyday life, you're able to catch yourself. The second you say something like that, you say, oh, you're so stupid. Why'd you do that? Oh, no, I can't say that to myself. You're not stupid. You just forgot because you weren't being mindful when you set this thing down. And then, you take a deep breath and bring your awareness to the present moment. And then the more often you do that, the more often you find that this negative self-talk isn't happening, or these intrusive memories or thoughts are not occurring as often. The act of wanting a thought to go away is actually thinking about the thing that you don't want to think about. So it's kind of a paradox, right? Because you have this negative emotion, you have this negative memory, you have this to-do list or whatever, these things that are bringing you just deep suffering, right? You don't have to feel that way. But so again, when I said that, a lot of people, when they begin meditation, they say, I'm getting worse. It's not getting worse. This waterfall effect is you noticing how often you do this to yourself. So it's really interesting the way that all of this works, because you start to notice your negative aspects, the things that you don't want. You pay attention to how often it's happening and you work to change it. So in all of this comes with, we've got a healthy sense of self and an unhealthy sense of self, okay? Our unhealthy sense of self, it's very hollow, it's black and white, it's very emotional, it's very reactive. It doesn't think before responding, right? It just does. It's kind of like our autopilot. And then we have our healthy sense of self. This is our compassionate nature. It's our wish to help others, charity, that kind of thing. It's very full. You get a lot of joy out of the things that you do when you are in your healthy sense of self. When you're in your unhealthy sense of self, it's like being frustrated because somebody in front of you in the grocery store is taking too long. It's attached to your ego. You are frustrated because the person in front of you is inconveniencing you. If you are in your healthy sense of self, you might think, oh, I wonder why this is taking so long. Maybe this person needs some help. And you're patient and you're calm and you're understanding. So when we meditate, we bring our awareness to this, our healthy sense of self and the things that make us feel good and the behaviors that we do that support our well-being. And those behaviors start to get more often, and the negative thought patterns and behaviors tend to fall off. So I used to really suffer with panic attacks, and it started when I was pretty young. And there was a point where they were so debilitating that I didn't leave my house for 3 months. It was awful. But eventually I learned that it wasn't so much the panic attacks that were the problem. It was my fear of having a panic attack that was the problem. Because I feared having a panic attack, which would bring on a panic attack. And then I would experience this over and over and over. It was a self-perpetuating cycle. So now, when we cultivate compassion, we are able to kind of talk ourselves down in those kinds of moments, right? So this is, I think it's really important to understand what compassion is first, okay? So compassion and love are interdependent. It means that you can't have one without the other. So we all have the potential to be happy and compassionate. We also have the potential to be miserable and harmful to others. We can hurt each other. All of us are capable of this. So basically, if you have happiness, and you have to have suffering to be able to understand happiness. You have to have good, or you have to have evil to be able to understand good. If things were good all of the time, if things were happy all of the time, we would never understand what bad was, but we also wouldn't understand what happy and good was, because we just always feel like that. It just is, right? You have to have something to compare it to. So they're also interdependent. So in order to understand compassion, we have to understand suffering. And I think everybody can say that they've suffered in some way or another, whether it's physical or emotional, mental. Life, we suffer. Things happen that cause suffering. Maybe, physical because of external causes, or it could be emotional because of internal causes. In order to understand compassion, we have to understand suffering. So what compassion is the desire to take away somebody else's suffering. So, and then love is the desire for them to be happy. So you have to understand the suffering, you have to understand the happiness. That's how we cultivate compassion. And this is also the same as empathy, really. When, somebody tells you a really sad story that hits you kind of in the feels, that kind of thing, that's compassion. And same as empathy. So when we want to learn how to accept what is, we have to learn how to be compassionate to ourselves when we are feeling these negative emotions. So the way to do that is first to learn meditation, to learn how to be mindful and pay attention to the present moment. And it's easy. I'll teach you a very quick lesson. But I also I don't know, Ron, I have a link to a free 7-day intro to meditation course. Can I share that on okay, awesome. And I also have a 7-day mindfulness journaling workbook that gratitude and that kind of stuff. So we'll put links in there. But the first thing to do is to learn how to be mindful and learn how to meditate. The second thing is to do a compassionate practice, which I'll also teach. It's about giving and receiving. And you can do this for yourself. You can do this for your loved ones. You can do it for all beings. And it's a really profound practice because, excuse me, when we talk about wisdom and things like that, wisdom, enlightenment in the Buddhist context, it's not, you don't just get there by meditating. You also have to cultivate compassion. You also have to have the desire to relieve suffering from other beings. So we'll do a quick little meditation exercise. And so the first thing, I have two tips, two very important tips. And I learned this from one of my teachers. His name is Mingyur Rinpoche. So the first, this just normal sit with your spine loosely straight. And if you are going to sit in a meditation practice at home, a formal meditation practice, you can either sit on a cushion on the floor or in a desk chair is great. Just make sure if you're sitting in a chair that your feet are flat on the ground. If you're sitting on the floor, cross-legged, however you're comfortable, but spine loosely straight. You can close your eyes or you can keep them open if you want to. And the first very important tip is don't meditate. Are you ready? Okay, so you just sit, spine loosely straight. You can keep your eyes open or closed. And okay, so did everybody not meditate? Awesome. Okay, step 2. Are you ready for step 2? The second step is the first step. So don't meditate. That's all you have to do. You sit and not meditate while you're meditating. So that is called shamatha without object, or resting awareness without focusing on an object. So typically in mindfulness, we learn how to focus on an object, usually the breath. There's nothing profound about the breath. I mean, it keeps us alive, which is essential. But the reason that we use the breath to focus on is because it's always there. If you're alive, you've got it with you. If you're breathing, you can meditate. So now we'll do, this is now considered a mindfulness practice. So we're focusing on an object, right? So again, spine loosely straight. And you bring your awareness to your breath. And you do not have to breathe in any specific way. Don't try to control your breathing because that's you trying to control your experience. Remember, we are not meditating. So you just want to focus on the breath. Just pay attention to what's happening. So notice where you feel the breath most distinctly. Maybe it's the tip of your nose, or it could be the rising and falling of your chest, or the air going down the back of your throat. Pay attention to that spot as you inhale. And then exhale. And we're going to start counting 1 at the bottom of the exhale. And I'll count to 10. I'll count 10 breaths, and we'll just do it together. Again, don't worry if your breath is not in sync with mine, not a problem. Okay. Inhale, exhale. 1. Inhale, exhale. 2. Inhale, exhale. 3. Inhale, exhale. 4. Inhale, exhale. 5. Inhale, exhale. 6. Inhale, exhale. 7. Inhale, exhale. 8. Inhale, exhale. 9. Inhale, exhale. 10. All right. Did you get distracted? Anybody get distracted? All right. So what happens is when you get distracted, that's okay. You're not trying to prevent thoughts. You want to pay attention to what is happening. You might be distracted for a while before you realize just how distracted you were. This is typical. When you do this on your own, if you get distracted before you get to 10, begin again at 1. Every time you realize that you're distracted, begin again at 1. Sometimes you might end up at like 25 before you realize that you forgot to stop at 10 because you're so distracted. So, and you may not make it more than one or two counts before you realize that you're distracted in the beginning. That's normal. It's okay. Thoughts are fine. Let them come, let them go. Your mind is like the sky, right? It's always clear. It's always blue. It's always there. It's fast. And your thoughts are like clouds passing by. All you're doing is watching them. Sometimes they might be interesting and you might get carried away with it. Sometimes it might get scary and you might want to run away from it. Sometimes it's really, happy and exciting. Doesn't matter. Whatever they are, let them come, let them go. Okay. So now to generate compassion, the first thing that we want to do is we want to do a quick mindfulness session to bring our awareness to the present moment. We're aware of our awareness, right? When we become aware, what we should do then is this is a practice for self-compassion. So you imagine yourself sitting in front of yourself, and you imagine that you are taking away your suffering in the form of like a black fog. It's coming from you as you inhale, and you imagine yourself inhaling it. And as it moves down to your heart center, you imagine that you're purifying this suffering. This could be emotional suffering, physical suffering. It doesn't matter what it is. Whatever is negative that you're feeling, you imagine taking that away and purifying it right here in your heart center. And you imagine it turning into a little ball of white light, which is loving kindness and compassion. And as you exhale, you imagine breathing out this white light that your other you inhales and is receiving. So you are purifying your own suffering and giving back only happiness and joy to yourself. Love. So, in order to learn how to accept what is, what we will then do is whenever we're feeling a negative emotion, especially, or we're having a scary, uh, something scary is happening, right? A lot of our bodies really remember our childhood. And we go back there real quick. And typically, whatever you might be a fight, flight, or freeze kind of person, right? It activates your, this is our sort of our primitive, the primitive part of our brain. When we fear that we're in danger, it activates our fight or flight response, but we also have fight, flight, or freeze. When this is activated constantly, this is the sort of thing that this is how PTSD is formed, right? Especially in combat. It's when that fight or flight response is constantly like this all the time. It creates that long term. I mean, obviously there's PTSD from just one event, but from the long, when people are there for a very long time, that whole area is activated constantly. That's our survival mode. We are biologically programmed to avoid pain. It's hardwired in order to ensure the survival of our species, to want to avoid pain and to seek happiness. We crave comfort and ease, and we run away from difficulty and pain, suffering. When we run away from those things, uh, this is how things like substance abuse form and addiction are formed, right? The desire to run away from the suffering. So, anytime when we learn how to meditate and we're able to pay attention to something that's activating our default mode network, is what it's called, sending us into that fight, flight, or freeze response that we learned as adolescents, we're able to identify what's happening in the body. So this is anytime you're triggered. It may be, yeah, here's an example. I was a bartender for a long time. And when I hear a football game on TV, it triggers the most profound anxiety because it was like everything was always behind. People were always yelling and screaming. And it was just really high stress all the time when there was football. And it's funny because it's automatic. It's not anything that I have no control over this, right? It's this nervous feeling that just activates in my stomach. And I'm like, oh no, run. Um, but this is what happens when we remember sort of painful memories and we stress about the future. It's activating this default mode network, and we get triggered, and then we get upset, and then we get upset with ourselves for being upset, and it's a vicious, endless loop. So when we are aware of the present moment and we have learned mindfulness, we can identify which feelings or sensations occur based on what stimulus we are getting. So when something brings you joy, you can recognize exactly what joy feels like in your body. When something brings you fear, fear feels different than anger. Um, you know, let's see, what else? Attachment feels different than love. Anxiety feels a lot like butterflies, but it's way different. When you learn how to differentiate these various emotions, then when you are activated or triggered, all of a sudden that's your signal to be mindful. All right, what's happening right now? My body is experiencing this because this is happening outside of me, or this is happening inside of me. And I'm okay with this happening. Whoa, right? Suddenly you have to accept what's happening. And the way that you accept that is you give yourself compassion. You say, I'm going to take away your suffering. You visualize yourself sitting in front of yourself. You don't have to be sitting in formal meditation to do this. You can do this practice anytime you wish. And you visualize you taking away your own suffering. And suddenly you're able to breathe. Suddenly you're able to be still and accept what's happening as a physical manifestation of something that's going on either in your mind or something that's beyond your control. So, in this very, very brief moment is where we find stillness. That's how we learn how to just be. So, like I said, I used to suffer from panic attacks for a very, very long time. And I learned how to use my panic attacks as support for my meditation. Rather than running from my panic attacks or being afraid of my panic attacks, I had to learn how to accept them as part of me in that moment. I was panicking. I felt like I was having a heart attack. I couldn't breathe. Everything's sweaty. And all of a sudden, that's my signal to be mindful, to be present, to be aware. And it's amazing because the more I did that, the more I realized that I was okay in that moment. Okay, I could reassure myself that I'm safe. I could reassure myself, your body is not in danger. You are okay. Nothing can get you in this moment. You're fine. And then you breathe yourself compassion and say, it's okay that you're feeling like this. That's not a problem. This is just a physical sensation in your body that's being manifested by your mind. Able to breathe. Suddenly the panic attacks started to shorten, and then they started to get less frequent because now I don't fear them anymore. I'm okay with them. All right, I'm having a panic attack right now. Oh, bummer, but we'll deal with it. Instead of having an aversion to it, I made friends with it. And this works with stress. This works with a lot of things. This practice is particularly useful in dealing with difficult people. So when somebody triggers you, you get upset with them, you imagine that person sitting in front of you, or somebody who's even hurt, somebody who has hurt you, caused you great harm. And it's a very difficult practice to be sure, but you imagine this person sitting in front of you and you generate loving kindness and compassion to them. Because if that person was happy inside, they would not have done anything to harm another person. The only people who harm others are ones who are suffering. So, the best way to improve the world is to work on yourself. It's contagious. Um, it, uh, it it helps. It helps others. Not only that, it helps us find patience in others where we did not have that before. You know, let's say you're on the highway and somebody's weaving in and out of traffic, and you're like, oh, you get mad at him because he almost hit you. But little do you know, maybe that person is in a rush to get to the hospital because some emergency has happened. We never know what's happening with other people. And so generating compassion for other people is also very, very, very useful. One of my teachers, she was a physician in Tennessee back in the 1960s. Tennessee or Oklahoma, I can't remember which one. But her and a couple of her colleagues were participating in a peaceful protest for civil rights. When out of nowhere, a couple of cars came out, they jumped out of the trunk of the cars with uh, shotguns and things and started opening fire on the peaceful protesters. A couple of her friends were hit. And she is now a Tibetan Buddhist Lama. And I asked her how she was able to forgive them for what they did. And she said that she used this practice to forgive them. She would imagine them sitting in front of her, and she would send them or imagine taking away their suffering and sending them back loving kindness and compassion. She said, because if they were happy, they would have never hurt anybody like that. That would have never happened to anybody. So it's in that we're also able to find forgiveness. So forgiving ourselves and forgiving others. So when we begin this practice, we begin with practicing it for ourselves. Sometimes it's very, very difficult to practice this for ourselves. So if that's difficult, then imagine somebody that you love very much. The one person that you love more than anybody else in the whole world. You imagine that person sitting in front of you first. And then you get comfortable with the practice. And then a little while later, you add yourself. And at first, it might feel really silly. It might feel useless. It might feel contrived. But the more you do it, the less it will feel that way. And you'll realize just how useful and profound the practice is. And eventually you start to really love yourself, which is super cool side effect. So we'll go ahead and do this short practice. So sit with your spine loosely straight. You can leave your eyes open or closed. And we'll just start with a couple of breaths on your own, paying attention to where you feel the breath most distinctly. Now, imagine yourself or somebody that you love sitting directly in front of you at eye level. And as you inhale, imagine that you're taking away all of their suffering, whether it be physical, mental, external, maybe something's going on with their health, maybe something with their family. Doesn't matter what it is. Just imagine that you're taking away their suffering in the form of black mist or fog. And as you inhale, it goes down into your lungs and into your heart center where you purify the suffering. And as you exhale, imagine it going back out in the form of a bright white light of happiness, joy, loving kindness, and compassion. And imagine the other you or the person that you love sitting in front of you. Imagine all of that going into them as they inhale. So just visualize this happening back and forth with your breath. As you visualize, the visualization does not need to be a picture in your head. It can simply be the words that you're saying to yourself. If you become distracted, that's not a problem. Just bring your awareness back to your breath. Notice what it feels like as you're doing this. Does it feel calm, peaceful? Does it feel easy? Does it feel forced? There's no right or wrong answer here. Just however it feels, it feels. Notice that and then continue on where you were going. Okay, how was that? Anybody enjoy? All right. So, uh, again, like I said, you don't have to sit in formal meditation practice to do this. You can do it while you can even do it while you're driving, to be honest. You can do it anytime. You're just imagining, you know, removing suffering and giving back loving kindness and compassion. Anytime you feel activated or triggered, if you can identify in that moment what's happening, if you're, maybe you're with somebody or something and they're trying to talk to you and you say, you know what, give me a minute, I just need a minute. And you walk away and you pay attention to what's going on in your body and be with yourself. Instead of running from your pain, you make friends with it. You say to yourself, it's all right that you're feeling this way. This too shall pass. And then you just bring your awareness back to the present moment. You can also, when you're identifying different emotions that may be triggering, a good idea might be to do a body scan. When you do this, you use your breath in the same way that we were generating compassion. Use your breath to move around different areas of your body to notice different sensations in your body, what it feels like. And if you have some sort of thought or something, then you pay attention to the physical sensations in your body. And anytime you get distracted, no problem. Thoughts, just one of those clouds passing by. Oh, distracted, no problem. Bring your awareness back to the breath. There's no right or wrong to meditation. You're just simply aware. There's no, it's not like learning any other skill in life because there's no goal. If you're trying to use meditation for a specific goal, like, oh, I'm going to use meditation to help with my panic attacks, right? Then it will never work. Those panic attacks will not get better because I'm attached to that specific goal. When it comes to meditation, you do not want to try to control your experience in any way. You just simply follow the steps of how to do it and don't try to control your experience. We like the peaceful sides of things. Again, like we have an aversion to pain and we have a craving for good feelings. So when we're sometimes in meditation, we're very calm. So we chase that, we crave that calm, we crave that peace. It's not always going to be peaceful like that. Our mind is also like a river. Sometimes it's very calm and still, and other times there are rapids or even waterfalls. Things are really, really bumpy. It's just important to accept whatever is. Thank you so much for having me. Is there any questions?
That was fantastic. I really like that second visualization. Thank you so much for that. And yeah, I'll have you connect with Vic, and we can put those links and everything when we post this class back on the network. And it will be available for people to see. So thank you so much for your time. It's like 2 a.m. there in Spain. I really appreciate it. Grateful for you.
No problem. Thank you guys so much for having me. I
Thank
really
you
super
so
appreciate it.
much. That was amazing. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much. In touch.
Okay, sounds good. Bye.